the crimson sky of Kepler-4 to be stretched endlessly above Dr. Nora Blake as she crouched beside the smoking wreckage. Her breath forming small clouds in the thin atmosphere despite her environmental suit's heating system. 3 days into what should have been a routine geological survey, and she'd stumbled upon something that would rewrite everything humanity thought they knew about intelligent life in this sector. The ship was unlike anything in Earth's databases. Its hull gleamed with an organic, metallic sheen that seemed to shift colors in the alien sunlight, and strange symbols glowed faintly along what she assumed was the vessel's spine. Most unsettling of all were the jagged tears in the metal, as if something with incredible claws had tried to rip the craft apart from the outside. "Base camp, this is Blake," she whispered into her comm unit. "I'm going to need xenobiology protocols initiated immediately. We're not alone out here." Static crackled back at her. The electromagnetic storms that plagued this region had been interfering with communications all week, leaving her effectively isolated until the next supply run. Part of her was grateful for the radio silence. This discovery was too important to risk corporate interference or military intervention, at least not yet. The ship's hull had cracked open along one side, revealing a dark interior that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Nora activated her suit's recording systems and approached cautiously, every scientific instinct screaming at her to document everything. The opening was just large enough for her to squeeze through sideways. Inside, the ship felt more grown than built. Curved walls pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light that reminded her uncomfortably of a heartbeat. The air was thick with an otherworldly scent she couldn't identify, something between ozone and exotic flowers. Her suit's sensors detected a breathable atmosphere, though rich in compounds unknown to Earth's databases. That's when she found him. The alien warrior lay crumpled against what might have been a control console, his massive frame barely fitting in what had probably been the pilot's chamber. Even unconscious and clearly injured, he was magnificent in a way that made Nora's pulse quicken with more than just scientific excitement. He stood at least 7 feet tall, with skin that held an almost golden luminescence marked by intricate patterns of darker gold that seemed to shift and move across his powerful form. His face was sharp-featured but undeniably masculine, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. 2 small, swept-back horns emerged from his temples, and his dark hair was long enough to brush his shoulders. Most striking were the bioluminescent markings that traced along his neck, arms, and what she could see of his chest through his torn garments. They pulsed slowly, growing dimmer with each passing moment. "God, you're dying," she breathed, her scientific detachment crumbling in the face of watching a sentient being fade away. Nora knelt beside him, her training as a xenobiologist warring with every protocol about first contact. The markings on his skin were clearly some kind of biological system, possibly related to his cardiovascular function. Dark blue fluid, presumably blood, seeped from several wounds along his torso and arms. She couldn't just let him die, not when he might be the key to understanding an entire civilization. Her hands moved to her medical kit. Before her conscious mind could stop her, the warrior's skin felt warm under her gloved fingers. In the moment she made contact with one of the glowing patterns on his neck, his eyes snapped open. They were the most incredible shade of amber she'd ever seen, with flecks of gold that seemed to swirl in the alien light. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other in mutual shock. Then something extraordinary happened. The bioluminescent patterns across his skin blazed suddenly brighter, and Nora felt a strange, tingling sensation race up her arms. The warrior's lips parted, revealing sharp canines, and he spoke a single word in a language she'd never heard, but somehow understood. "Mine." Before she could react, his hand shot out faster than anything that injured should have been able to move. Strong fingers wrapped around her wrist, and she felt a sharp pressure against her pulse point. Not painful exactly, but definitely significant. The last thing she saw before the world went dark was the warrior's amber eyes, ablazing with an inner fire, and the sudden realization that the bite-like sensation on her wrist wasn't just contact. It was a mark, a claim, a bond that she somehow knew with a certainty that defied all logic, could never be broken. When the darkness took her, Nora Blake's last coherent thought was that her life, as she'd known it, was over. She just didn't yet understand how completely, irrevocably, and wonderfully it had changed. Consciousness returned to Nora in waves, each one bringing new sensations that shouldn't have been possible. She could hear her own heartbeat with startling clarity, feel the electromagnetic field generated by her tablet across the room, and somehow sense the emotional state of every person in the research facility. Most overwhelming of all was the constant awareness of another presence in her mind, powerful and distinctly alien. She opened her eyes to find herself in the medical bay of Base Camp Alpha, surrounded by concerned faces. Captain Rex Morrison stood at the foot of her bed, his weathered features creased with worry and something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Blake, thank God you're awake," Rex said, though he kept his distance. "We found you unconscious inside. That ... thing, you've been out for 18 hours. What the hell happened in there?" Before she could answer, a commotion erupted from the containment lab adjacent to medical. The sound of metal straining, followed by a roar that made every person in the room freeze. It was a sound of pure fury and desperation, and it resonated through Nora's bones in a way that made her gasp. "The alien?" she managed to ask, struggling to sit up despite the dizziness. "Secured in containment," Rex replied grimly, "though I'm starting to question how long those barriers will hold him. He's been going crazy since we brought you both in. The thing is, he only gets violent when medical tries to work on you. It's like he knows." Nora touched her wrist where she remembered the warrior's fingers had gripped her. The skin looked normal, but she could feel something there, a warmth that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. When she concentrated on the sensation, the roaring from the next room suddenly stopped. "I need to see him," she said, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. "Absolutely not," Rex commanded. "Blake, that thing is dangerous. Our scans show he's got bone density 3 times that of a human, muscle mass that defies physics, and reflexes that our equipment can barely measure. Plus, there's something weird happening to your bio-readings ever since we found you." "What?" "Kind of weird." Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's physician, stepped forward with a tablet full of readouts. "Your neural activity has increased by 30%. Your immune system is operating at levels we've never recorded. Your hormone levels, ... double quotes." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "Are consistent with someone who's undergone extreme bonding. Trauma. The kind we see in cases of forced psychological imprinting." Another roar from containment, this one somehow more desperate. Nora felt an answering pull in her chest, as if something vital was being stretched to its breaking point. "He's not dangerous," she found herself saying, "at least not to me. His name is Kane Nex. He's a warrior of the Zirathi Empire, and he's..." She struggled for the right words. "He's mine." The room fell silent, except for the hum of equipment. Rex's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "Blake, listen to yourself. That's not you talking. It's whatever that thing did to you in the ship." But Nora was already standing, driven by an instinct stronger than fear or logic. The sensation in her wrist pulsed stronger, and she could feel Kane's distress like a physical ache in her chest. When she reached for the containment lab door, Rex stepped into her path. "Stand down, Captain," she said quietly, and something in her voice made him hesitate. "I'm going in there, and you're not going to stop me." The containment lab fell silent as she entered. Kane stood in the center of the reinforced chamber, his hands pressed against the energy barrier that held him. The bioluminescent patterns on his skin blazed brighter when he saw her, and his amber eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying an accent that somehow made English sound like music. "My mate, you are hurt." "I'm fine," she replied, surprised by how natural the conversation felt despite the impossibility of it. "But you're not. You need medical attention." Never taking his eyes off her. "Cannot be touched by others now. Only you. The bond." He pressed his hand against his chest over his heart. "It burns when we are apart." Nora approached the barrier, ignoring the protests from the observation deck behind her. When she placed her palm against the energy field, directly opposite where Kane's hand rested, the strange sensations in her body intensified. She could feel his relief like a cool breeze on a hot day. "What did you do to me?" she asked softly. What might people do to claim a mate? He replied, his voice gentle despite its power. My language, it is called Thelanara, the soul binding. It happens when a Zirathi warrior recognizes his destined partner, the scientific part of her mind rebelled even as her heart raced. That's impossible. We're different species. Kane's expression grew tender. The universe decides compatibility, not biology. Your spirit called to mine when you touched me with healing intent. The bond formed itself. I could not have stopped it, even if I wished to. And do you wish to stop it? His smile revealed those sharp canines again, but instead of seeming dangerous, they looked almost endearing. Never, my Nora Blake. You are everything I never knew I was searching for. Behind her, she could hear Rex arguing with Dr. Chen about protocols and contamination risks. But their voices seemed distant compared to the warmth spreading through her chest as Kane spoke her name. What happens now? She asked. Now you must choose, Kane replied seriously. The bond can be completed, making us truly mated in all ways. Or it can be severed, though. ... Double quotes, he hesitated. The process would be painful for both of us, and I do not know if your human physiology could survive it. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Through the observation window, Nora could see Rex frantically checking readouts while Dr. Chen shouted orders into her communicator. What's happening? Nora called out. Rex's voice came through the intercom, tight with tension. Long-range sensors are picking up incoming ships. Big ones. And they're not human. Kane's entire body went rigid, his bioluminescent patterns shifting from warm gold to aggressive crimson. Zirathi hunting party, he growled. They have come for me. Then we'll give you back to them, Rex said through the speaker. Problem solved. No. Kane's voice carried a finality that made everyone freeze. They have not come to retrieve me. They have come to claim my mate for themselves. In Zirathi law, an unbonded female who has been marked but not fully claimed can be taken by any warrior strong enough to defeat her current protector. Nora felt ice form in her stomach. How long do we have? Perhaps an hour before they achieve. Orbit, Kane replied. There will be at least 3 warriors aboard. All of them stronger and more experienced than I am in my current condition. Rex's voice cut through the intercom again. Blake, get away from that barrier. We're going to sedate the alien and figure out how to negotiate with his people. But Nora was already reaching for the barrier controls. The moment she deactivated the energy field, Kane stepped through and pulled her into his arms. The contact sent shockwaves through her entire nervous system. She gasped as the incomplete bond between them suddenly flared to life. Choose. Now, my heart, he whispered against her ear.
8.
Will you accept me as your mate?
8.
Will you let me protect you with the full strength of our bond? Looking into his amber eyes, feeling the absolute certainty of his devotion, Nora Blake made the decision. That would change everything. Yes. The completion of the bond was unlike anything Nora could have imagined. When Kane's lips met hers, every nerve ending in her body came alive with electric sensation. The bioluminescent patterns on his skin blazed so brightly they illuminated the entire containment lab, and she felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. It was as if a missing piece of herself had suddenly clicked into place. The kiss deepened, and with it came a flood of shared memories and emotions. She experienced flashes of Kane's life, his childhood on the desert world of Zeroth Prime, his training as a warrior, the loneliness that had driven him to volunteer for deep space reconnaissance missions. In return, she felt him absorbing her. Memories, understanding her dedication to science, her wonder at discovering new worlds. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. The patterns on Kane's skin had settled into a warm, steady glow, and Nora could feel a constant awareness of his presence in the back of her mind. More than that, she felt stronger, faster, more alive than she ever had before. The bond is complete, Kane said softly, cupping her face in his hands. You are truly mine now, and I am yours. The moment was shattered by another blaring alarm. Rex's voice crackled through the intercom, tight with panic. Blake, whatever you just did, It triggered every sensor in the facility, and those ships? They just dropped out of hyperspace. They have maybe 20 minutes before they reach the surface. Kane released her, his expression shifting into something predatory. They will have detected the completion of our bond. It changes things. How? Nora asked, though part of her already knew the answer through their connection. A fully bonded mate cannot be claimed by force under Zerathi law. But ... double quotes. He hesitated. They can challenge me for the right to kill you. If you are dead, the bond is broken, and they are free to seek their own mates elsewhere. That's barbaric. It is the way of warriors, Kane replied grimly. I should have been stronger. Would have waited until I could face them at full strength. Rex burst through the lab door, flanked by 2 security officers with weapons drawn. Step away from Dr. Blake, alien. Now, to Nora's surprise, she felt no fear. Instead, a fierce protectiveness surged through her, and she stepped between the weapons and her mate. Stand down, Captain. All of you. Blake, that thing has done something to your mind. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have, she replied, and realized it was true. Through the bond, she could sense the approaching ships with startling precision. 3 vessels, each carrying a single warrior. All of them broadcasting challenge frequencies on Zerathi communication bands. One presence stood out from the others, darker and more aggressive. Even at a distance, his malevolent intent made her skin crawl. Valdris next, Kane growled, apparently sensing the same thing. I should have known he would come. You know him? We were raised in the same warrior house. He has always coveted what belongs to others, and he has never forgiven me for being chosen for the reconnaissance corps while he was assigned to planetary defense. Kane's patterns flickered with anger. He will not be satisfied with merely defeating me. He will want to make you suffer first. The lights in the facility flickered as something large landed outside with enough force to shake the entire structure. Through the small window, Nora could see a sleek vessel with the same organic design as Kane's crashed ship, only this one was pristine and obviously built for war. Rex, she said urgently, you need to evacuate your people. Get everyone to the emergency shelters and keep them there until this is over. I'm not abandoning you to these things, Rex protested. You're not abandoning me. You're protecting your team from becoming collateral damage in a fight you can't win. As if to emphasize her point, the facility's main door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. A figure stepped through the smoking ruins, and even without their bond, Nora would have known this wasn't Kane's species at their best. Where Kane's presence felt warm and protective, this newcomer radiated cold aggression. Valdris next stood nearly as tall as Kane, but his bioluminescent patterns were a harsh silver instead of gold, and they pulsed with rapid, agitated rhythms. His features were sharper, more predatory, and when he smiled, his canines seemed longer and more prominent. Kane next, he called out in accented English, his voice carrying easily through the facility. I have come to claim what you are too weak to protect. Rex raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Valdris moved. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next, he was directly in front of the captain, one clawed hand wrapped around the barrel of the gun. The metal crumpled like paper. Human weapons are useless against Zerathi warriors, Valdris said conversationally, then backhanded Rex with enough force to send him flying into the wall. The captain hit hard and didn't get up. Nora started toward Rex, but Kane caught her. Arm he lives, he said softly. Valdris wants to demonstrate his superiority, not waste time on weaklings. Valdris laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How considerate of me. Now then, where is this precious mate of yours, Kane? I admit I am curious to see what human female was worth, abandoning your duties to the Empire. Before Kane could respond, Nora stepped out of the containment lab. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to let Kane handle this, but something deeper, something connected to the bond, told her that showing weakness now would only make things worse. Valdris's silver patterns flared brighter as he took in her appearance. Interesting, he purred. I can see the appeal. Tell me, little human, do you understand what your mate has condemned you to? I understand that you're trespassing in human territory and threatening a research facility, Nora replied. Surprised by the steadiness of her own voice, I also understand that, according to your own laws, You have no claim on me. Valdris's smile widened, clever as well as beautiful. Yes, you are correctly bonded. But Zerathi law also states that if your mate dies in honorable combat, you are free to choose another protector. I volunteer for the position. And if I refuse, then you die with him. Either way I win. Cain moved to stand beside Nora, his own patterns blazing with golden fire. You always were a coward, Valdris, hiding behind technicalities instead of earning what you desire. I earned my strength through countless battles while you played explorer among the stars, Valdris snarled. But no matter. Accept my challenge, and let us settle this properly. As the two warriors faced each other, Nora felt something stirring. Inside her, something that definitely wasn't entirely human anymore. Through the bond, she could sense Cain's determination and his fear, not for himself, but for her. She could also sense something else, two more Zerathi signatures approaching the facility. Cain, she whispered, there are others coming. His jaw tightened. Valdris brought witnesses to ensure the challenge is conducted honorably. They will not interfere, but they will also not allow anyone else to do so. As if summoned by his words, two more figures appeared in the ruined doorway. These warriors were less aggressive in their bearing, but no less dangerous. They nodded respectfully to Cain and took positions on either side of the room. The terms are set, one of them announced formally. Single combat, no weapons save, natural abilities. The winner claims the human female. The loser dies. Valdris cracked his knuckles with sounds like gunshots. I have been looking forward to this for a very long time, old friend. But as the two warriors began to circle each other, Nora felt something unexpected through the bond. Not just Cain's emotions, but something more. Knowledge, understanding. The completion of their bond hadn't just connected their hearts and minds. It had begun to awaken something dormant in her human DNA, something that responded to Zerathi. Genetics in ways that shouldn't have been possible. She was changing, becoming something new. And if she was right about what she was feeling, Valdris had made a critical error in his assumptions about exactly what he was fighting for. The hunt was about to become much more interesting. The two warriors circled each other in the center of the facility's main lab, their movements fluid and predatory. Valdris was larger and clearly more experienced in combat, his silver patterns pulsing with aggressive energy, but Cain moved with a precision that spoke of different kinds of battles fought. His golden glow remained steady despite his injuries. Nora could feel everything through their bond. Cain's pain from wounds not fully healed, his determination to protect her, and underneath it all, his absolute certainty that he would rather die than let Valdris touch her. The intensity of his devotion was almost overwhelming. You were always too sentimental, Valdris taunted as they continued their deadly dance. It makes you weak. And you were always too eager to take what others valued, Cain replied calmly. It makes you predictable. The first exchange was lightning. Fast. Valdris lunged forward with claws extended, aiming for Cain's throat. But Cain was already moving, slipping aside and delivering a strike to Valdris's ribs that would have shattered human bones. Valdris absorbed the blow and spun, his backhand catching Cain across the jaw with enough force to send him staggering. Through the bond, Nora felt the impact as if it had hit her as well. She gasped, pressing her hand to her own jaw, and felt the strange warmth in her body intensify. Something was definitely happening to her. Something beyond the normal effects of a Zerathi bond. Dr. Chen appeared beside her. Having apparently emerged from wherever Rex had ordered the staff to take shelter, Nora, your bio readings are going completely haywire. Your cellular activity is increasing exponentially, and your neural patterns. She paused, looking at her scanner in confusion. They're starting to match the alien frequency signatures we detected from the warriors. Before Nora could respond, Valdris landed a solid blow to Cain's stomach, doubling him over. The silver-patterned warrior followed up with both hands clasped, together bringing them down toward Cain's spine in a move that would have paralyzed a human permanently. No, Nora shouted, and something extraordinary happened. The lights throughout the facility surged and flickered. Every piece of electronic equipment in the lab sparked or shut down entirely, and Valdris's killing blow stopped mere inches from Kane's back, the warrior frozen in place with a look of shock on his face. Impossible, one of the witnesses breathed in their musical language. Nora looked down at her hands, to find them glowing with the same bioluminescent patterns that marked the Zirathi warriors. But where theirs were gold or silver, hers pulsed with brilliant white light that seemed to contain every color of the spectrum. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Kane straightened slowly, his amber eyes wide with wonder. Through their bond, she could feel his amazement and something else. Recognition. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be," he said softly. "The legends speak of it, but none of us believed. Nora, you are not just human. You carry the genetic markers of the first ones, the race that seeded both our worlds long ago."
Wow.
"That's scientifically impossible," Dr. Chen protested, though. Her voice lacked conviction as she stared at Nora's glowing hands. "Is it?" Kane asked. "Why do you think the bond worked so perfectly between us? Why do you think your people and mine can even breathe the same air, speak similar languages, find each other attractive? We are not separate species. We are branches of the same ancient tree." Valdris broke free of whatever had frozen him, snarling with rage. "Genetics mean nothing in combat. She is still weak, still human where it matters." He lunged toward Nora instead of Kane, clearly intending to end the fight by eliminating its prize. But as his claws reached for her throat, Nora's new instincts kicked in. She moved with speed that shouldn't have been possible, catching Valdris's wrist and stopping his attack cold. The warrior's eyes widened as he found himself unable to break her grip. The white light of her patterns blazed brighter, and where her fingers touched his skin, his silver markings began to dim. "You're right," she said quietly. "Genetics mean nothing in combat. But evolution does, and I'm evolving past the need to. Be protected." She released him with a push that sent him stumbling backward into one of the lab tables. Equipment crashed to the floor and Valdris struggled to regain his footing, his patterns now flickering weakly. "The bond," Kane said with growing excitement. "It's not just connecting us emotionally. It's awakening dormant genetic sequences that have been sleeping in both our species for millennia. You're becoming something new, something more than either human or Zirathi." Before anyone could react to this revelation, alarms began blaring. Again, but this time, the warning wasn't about approaching ships. Rex's voice crackled through the damaged communication system from wherever he'd taken shelter. "Blake, we've got a massive problem. Is that energy surge you just created? It sent out some kind of signal? We're detecting at least a dozen ships dropping out of hyperspace, and they're not Zirathi." Through the facility's windows, Nora could see streaks of light descending through the atmosphere. But these ships were different from the organic Zirathi vessels. They were angular, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around themselves. One of the Zirathi witnesses spoke rapidly. In their native language, his voice tight with fear. Kane translated grimly. "Velter, it's the enemy that drove both our peoples to the Outer Rim worlds generations ago. They hunt for those who carry the first one genetics, seeking to eliminate any trace of the original race." "Let me guess," Nora said, looking at her still glowing hands. "I just lit up like a beacon for them." "We have to get out of here," Dr. Chen said urgently. "All of us." But Valdris wasn't finished. Despite his weakened state, he lunged at Nora again, apparently preferring to kill her himself rather than let the Veltor have her. This time, however, Kane was ready. He intercepted the attack, and the two warriors went down in a tangle of claws and fury. The fight was brief but brutal. When it ended, Valdris lay unconscious on the floor, and Kane stood over him with golden patterns blazing triumphantly. But there was no time to celebrate victory. The first Valter ship landed outside with a sound like breaking crystal. And through the shattered windows came creatures that made the Zirathi look almost human by comparison. They moved like liquid. Shadow-given form, with multiple arms that ended in razor-sharp talons and eyes that glowed with cold blue fire. "Dr. Fletcher," Nora called out, remembering her colleague who'd been working in the geological lab when everything started. "Where's James?" Dr. Chen's face went pale. "He's in the deep core sample storage, the most heavily shielded part of the facility, and the most isolated," Kane added grimly. If the Valter detected his location through sensor scans, he's trapped, as if summoned by their conversation. James Fletcher's voice crackled through the intercom system, distorted by interference but unmistakably terrified. Is anyone out there? There are things trying to break through the containment doors. I don't know how long the barriers will hold. Nora looked around the ruined laboratory at her injured mate, the unconscious Valdris, the two Zerathi witnesses who were clearly preparing for a last stand, and Dr. Chen with her medical scanner. Outside, more Valter ships were landing, disgorging creatures that looked like living nightmares. The smart choice would be to run, to escape while they still could, and let James make his own fate. It was what any rational person would do, but as the white light of her patterns pulsed brighter, Nora Blake realized she was no longer entirely rational. She was something new, something that carried the legacy of a race that had once ruled the stars. And that legacy came with responsibilities. We're going after him, she announced. Kane smiled, his amber eyes bright with pride. I knew there was a reason the universe chose you as my mate. The choice was made. Now they just had to survive it. The journey through the facility's corridors was like navigating a nightmare. Valter had infiltrated through every possible entry point, their shadow-like forms flowing through vents and gaps that should have been too small for any living creature. But Nora found that her new abilities extended beyond just strength and speed. She could sense their presence before they appeared, feel their cold malevolence like ice against her consciousness. Kane moved beside her with fluid grace, his injuries seemingly forgotten in the face of protecting his mate. Behind them, the two Zerathi witnesses, who had introduced themselves as Thane Kreese and Warrior Lex, provided rear guard while Dr. Chen stayed protectively in the center of their formation. The storage facility is just ahead, Chen whispered, consulting her tablets, building schematics. But there are at least 6 Valter between us and the sealed doors. 7, Nora corrected softly, her enhanced senses picking up another signature. Lurking in the shadows above their heads, one in the ceiling ducts. As if summoned by her words, a section of the ceiling tiles exploded downward as a Valter dropped into their midst. Up close, the creature was even more terrifying than from a distance. Its form seemed to shift between solid matter and living shadow, and when it opened, what might have been a mouth. Rows of crystalline teeth gleamed in the emergency lighting. Kane reacted first, his claws raking across the creature's torso. But instead of blood, the wounds leaked something that looked like liquid starlight. And the Valter barely seemed to notice the damage. Its multiple arms lashed out, forcing the group to scatter. That's when Nora discovered another aspect of her transformation. When the Valter's talons came within inches of Dr. Chen, Nora didn't just move to intercept them. A barrier of white light that stopped the attack cold. The creature shrieked, a sound like breaking glass amplified through a cathedral, and its shadow form began to smoke where the light touched it. The light burns them, Thane Kreese observed with professional interest. The first one, genetics, carried defensive capabilities we had forgotten. Good to know, Nora replied grimly, expanding the barrier to encompass their entire group. But I don't know how long I can maintain this. They fought their way through the remaining Valter with a combination of Kane's warrior skills, the witness's tactical expertise, and Nora's growing mastery of her light-based abilities. By the time they reached the storage facility's blast doors, she was exhausted but victorious. The doors had held, but barely. Scorch marks and deep gouges showed where the Valter had been trying to break through. When the locks disengaged, James Fletcher stumbled out, his face pale with terror and relief. Nora. Thank God, I thought. What happened to you? You're glowing. Long story, she replied, helping him to his feet. Right now we need to focus on getting out of here alive. But as they prepared to retrace their steps, Warrior Lex spoke up urgently. The Valter have called for reinforcements. I count at least 30 more ships in orbit, and they're beginning orbital bombardment patterns. Through the facilities, reinforced windows, they could see beams of blue energy lancing down from the sky, turning the surrounding landscape into a hellscape of molten rock and twisted metal. It was clear that escape through conventional means was impossible. There might be another way, Kane said thoughtfully. Valdris's ship is still intact, and Zarathi vessels are built to withstand this kind of assault. If we can reach it, ... That's a big if, Dr. Chen pointed out. We'd have to cross 200 meters of open ground while being hunted by shadow monsters and targeted from orbit. Nora looked at her glowing hands, feeling the power that coursed through her veins. Through the bond with Cain, she could sense his absolute faith in her abilities, his certainty that together they could overcome anything. But more than that, she could feel something else, the presence of other awakening bloodlines scattered across the galaxy. Humans and Zarathi and dozens of other species, all beginning to rediscover their First One heritage. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival, or even for the people in this room. She was fighting for the future of multiple civilizations. I have an idea, she said quietly, but I need everyone to trust me completely. What happened next would be remembered in the legends of both species for generations to come. Nora Blake, xenobiologist turned something far greater, stepped outside into the hellfire of the Velter bombardment and raised her hands to the alien sky.
Ow.
The white light of her patterns blazed brighter than ever before, but instead of forming a simple barrier, she reached out with her consciousness and touched the dormant genetic markers in every living being within a 100-kilometer radius. Human colonists, Zarathi warriors, even some of the native wildlife of Kepler 4-4b, all began to glow with variations of the First One patterns. The combined light was so intense it could be seen from orbit, and the Velter bombardment faltered. As their targeting systems were overwhelmed by the sudden proliferation of priority targets, "Now," Nora shouted, and their group sprinted across the devastated landscape toward Valdris's ship. They made it with seconds to spare, the ship's biolock recognizing Cain as a valid pilot and allowing them access. As the organic vessel lifted off, its hull singing with harmonics that confused Velter sensors, Nora collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, completely drained. "That was incredible," James breathed, staring at her in wonder. "You just awakened an entire world." "It won't last long for most of them," Cain explained, as he guided the ship through the orbital battle that had erupted between Velter forces and the newly arrived Zarathi fleet. But it bought us time, and it sent a message to the universe that the First Ones are returning. 3 days later, they arrived at Zeroth Prime, the desert homeworld of Cain's people. The ship settled onto a landing platform carved from red sandstone, where a small crowd of Zarathi had gathered to witness their arrival. Their head stood an elderly warrior whose patterns had faded to pale gold with age, but whose bearing spoke of immense dignity and wisdom. "Elder Quenzix," Cain said formally as they disembarked. "I bring my bonded mate for recognition before the Council of Clans." The elder's ancient eyes studied Nora with interest that went far beyond curiosity. "We have heard the reports from the Outer Rim. A human who carries the First One bloodline, who can awaken others to their heritage. Such a one has not been seen for 1,000 years. I'm still figuring out what it all means," Nora admitted honestly. "But I know that Cain and I belong together, and that our bond is just the beginning of something larger." Elder Quenzix smiled, revealing teeth that were still sharp despite his age. "Then let us make it official. The ceremony of eternal claiming awaits, if you are both prepared to accept the full consequences of your choice." The ceremony took place at sunset, when Zarath Prime's twin suns painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Nora wore traditional Zarathi mating robes that had been hastily modified for human proportions, while Cain stood beside her in the formal armor of his clan. Around them, hundreds of Zarathi warriors and their mates bore witness to something unprecedented in their history. Elder Quenzix spoke the ancient words in the original Zarathi tongue, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. But through her bond with Cain, Nora understood every syllable. Let it be known that these two souls have chosen each other across the vastness of space and the barriers between species. Let their bond be a beacon to others that love recognizes no boundaries, that strength comes from unity, and that the legacy of the First Ones lives on in those brave enough to embrace change. When the elder asked for their vows, Cain spoke first, his amber eyes never leaving Nora's face. "I claim you as my eternal mate, my partner in all things, my heart made manifest in another soul. Where you go, I follow. What you fight, I fight. Beside you, who you become, I celebrate and support with every breath in my body. Nora's response came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. From the part of her that now carried starlight in her veins. I claim you as my eternal mate, my anchor across the cosmos, my strength when darkness falls. Your people are my people, your battles are my battles, your dreams are the compass by which I navigate the future. The final part of the ceremony required them to share blood, a symbolic mixing that would complete their bond on every possible level. When Cain's blood touched hers, the patterns on both their bodies blazed with light that illuminated the entire ceremonial ground. In that moment, Nora felt the last of her purely human limitations fall away, replaced by something magnificent and new. She was no longer Dr. Nora Blake, xenobiologist.